to NycosRPG. Tonight we are going to be talking about what role-playing is and more particularly how it works. We're going to look at the elemental pieces and kind of put the whole puzzle together so you can understand why you might want to be a player in a role-playing game at some point. If you have been here before and you like what you see, make sure you go down below and click all the buttons so the algorithm knows you're part of our audience. If you haven't yet been able to subscribe, make sure you get that done as well because it really helps the channel. And I've got a lot of information to go over, so I'm going to be going through it relatively quickly, and there's some really interesting bits near the end, so make sure you follow through all the way. Let's go.
Absorbing damage is the name of the game. From the claws of monsters or the heat from a ball of flame, or strength in numbers is a roll of the dice.
Alright, so tabletop roleplay games are fundamentally, to most people I suppose, a bit of a mystery. Why people would sit around, especially grown-up people, sit around a table and discuss or carry on a conversation as if in another place in a make-believe world seems to be a little bit of a crackpot category. But I'm going to talk to you today about the basics of role play, how players interact with the story, how the story interacts with the environment, and how the players derive enjoyment from it. Now, it is under the category of role-playing games, and most of us are familiar with the idea that role-playing games have a concept of being a winner or a loser, because that comes with the concept of games. But we're going to be talking about that as well as we go through the particulars. So the first thing, of course, we want to talk about are the very basics of role play. So what puts the role in role play? Well, the concept of picking up and playing a role in a story. This comes, of course, from the concept of drama, acting, theater, and the idea of playing a role actually goes back to our childhood. When we were kids, we would go outside and we would play, the concept of playing house or playing doctor or playing World War II. We would pick an environment and then we would pick a particular character persona for ourselves to play in that session. And it might morph, it might change over the period of time that we played, but this idea of role-playing really is that simple. We are pretending to be people in other roles. And in some cases, this is complete departure and a way of escapism. To others, it's a way to look at a possible future they might have gone into in another way. The mechanism, of course, determines what framework you are in. So whether that is an ancient, fantasy setting in a medieval-like world where swords and sorcery are the norm, or if you're playing a modern urban drama horror adventure, the idea is that you are picking up a role to play and you are taking on that obligation within the story. Now, even the definition of role varies from system to system. So in some cases, the role that you are playing is more mathematical and similar to perhaps the way a video game plays, in that you might be the team's tank, the person that can take the large amount of damage, or perhaps you are the damage dealer, or you are the buffer or the debuffer. And these terms have adapted and been adopted over time for different game types, and I would assess that for every role player out there, there is a different game mechanism that's available, and so the flavor of the story that you are a part of and the method and the mechanics will alter the way in which you play, but the concept is that you are taking on generally an individual role for the duration of the session, and then your actions are fundamentally scored or judged or monitored in reference to the possibilities or the probabilities that that particular role demands of you. Now, the second thing to consider is what is it that you're actually doing? And we've done an entire video, I'll put the link up above in this section right here, about that, in particular on how it is that we do what we do in a role-play game. But these actions are the fundamental mechanisms that become the play aspect. There is generally a random number generation system in place where you use a dice or a single die or a multiple of dice to determine the success or failure of your action, and then the number of actions that are completed determine your success or failure in the game. And so the play is actually in determining which dice to use when, and generally, the dice roll portion of the game is actually underplayed because it is actually just merely the mechanism. The actual story or outcomes of the dice rolls are far more important to the overall progression. And so, therefore, they are usually directly interpreted either by the game master, the players, or a combination to develop the story of the action. Of course, the next thing you have to look at is this one or that one? That one. The next thing is to look at the story development, and this effectively refers to the plot of the story, what the director, what the game master, or perhaps the collective group has determined will be the course of the direction of the story. And this is the story within the storytelling. And in many cases, the plot can be subsumed and overtaken by the die rolling. It can be a situation where the story changes based on what the actions of the players are. But the idea is that the plot or the progression of the story is how you are determining how far into the story or how far towards the conclusion you have moved with each session. And the game master or director then provides direction. And this is the portion of the game that falls least in line with the way we played it when we were kids. The idea was that when you played a game outside with kids or played house or doctor or whatever, you didn't have a parameter that determined your success or failure of a section. You just simply narrated your way through it. And so in the case of a storyteller or a game master, they now direct the action, determine which die rolls are relevant, which ones aren't, and therefore help to guide the direction of the story in the telling portion of the storytelling. So, of course, with any other mechanism, you'll want to look at a game and want to know how it is we determine who wins or loses. And fundamentally, the scorekeeping in role-playing, if it comes down to it, is the memorability of the encounters. If a session that you run is brought up for weeks and weeks afterwards by the players, then you have done a fine job of creating a storytelling mechanism that captures that essence in a way that the players find appealing enough to bring up over and over again. And that's fundamentally a, quote, good score, so to speak. It doesn't necessarily mean that there is a winner or a loser. As a matter of fact, I did a video on winning and losing in role-play games, and I'll try to remember to put a tag in this one for that. But the idea that we are playing a role-playing game for the experience of playing, the memories are the way we keep track, the way we know we've done a good job or not is by the amount of memories that we've created within the games group that we're playing. Of course, the frame of reference or the place in which this all occurs is generally within the imagination. The storyteller creates a story, whether he does so through theater of the mind or the use of miniatures and models and maps. The idea is that the actual engagement occurs in the realm of the fantastic, and therefore the imagination is the primary place that the actions occur. Die rolls adjust or modify successes or failures, but the world as perceived by the players is really what determines where the action occurs. When you do defeat the dragon, where did that occur? That defeat occur? Now, when it comes down to it, this concept of winning in a role-play game really does come out in terms of the benefits and bragging rights that the players gather for their portions of the action when they have done something particularly clever or astute or selfless. These elements are brought forward and brought to remembrance by the other players, and this provides the merit-based system, if you will, wherein the players gain their experience from the game and their thrill of playing is in determining those outcomes. So between the particularly good dice rolls, particularly clever planning, the idea of the players' progression really is the elemental place wherein their successes are measured. And what this does in essence, however, is makes the game seem more mysterious because there are no tangible rewards per se. Of course, when you have a campaign setting or a session that has multiple parts and you've built up the thrill and the excitement over the various parts, the culmination of that story, the completion of it, and the conclusion of it really does generate some major benefits and results for the players in a non-tangible way, and yet they certainly remember when they defeated this villain or overcame that destructive element, when they've liberated a city or freed a people. These things all are memories, although they are manufactured in a fictional setting. Nonetheless, they are just as valid because they did take accomplishment by the players to achieve. So the real element that matters to the players isn't necessarily the direction and focus and purpose of the story, but the strength and the power thereof. If they are moved to act, to decide, and progress towards a solution, then the story has done its job per se. I often refer to the story as the Xth character at the table. If you have 6 players, you have 7, because the story itself plays the role of instigator and motivator. But whether that is a strong or a weak argument really falls to the side when the players find the outcome of the engagement to have been worth their effort. And the way you can determine this is whether or not they keep coming back. If a story is compelling and strong enough, the players will be there by hook or crook every session because they want to be part of the conclusion of the matter. Now that means it comes down to the end is when you as a non-player look at a role-play game, what is it that you see? What is it that I can convey to you? Well, I can say that my players that enjoy the game will step to the fore and point out the places that they have felt the excitement and the thrill of the game. They will share with you when they have felt the most powerful, the strongest, the most lucky, and these points generally fall into line with what the story elements are so that they feel the success of the group. Now, this is, I believe, one of the challenges that role-play games in general have in bringing new players to the tabletop, because we have a hard time expressing what is enjoyable, thrilling, and fun about the games. And I will be releasing videos in the next week or so where I've talked with my players and had them try to express this to make it a little bit easier for you to grasp what's really important about being at the table. I want to thank you for being here. We're going to got to get down to our parting shots, though. And that is when we talk about what the reason to play is. The reason to play is the challenge of play itself. It's the very old statement, why would somebody climb Mount Everest? Because it is there. We have a method for engagement that we learned when we were kids, we utilized effectively when we were kids, but we for some reason have walked away from it in our adulthood. And by reaching back into our world of games, into our place of play, we get the opportunity to regain that portion of our infinite spirit, if you will, that was childlike, and reestablish those links to our imagination that will make our lives more enjoyable today. I want to thank you for being here, and I want you to make sure to put a comment below. Lets us know what ways in which role-playing perhaps has benefited you. If you are not a role player, perhaps put some questions about what you'd like to hear from people in the games business about why they do what they do and how those games have affected them. I'm Jonathan Albin. This has been NycosRPGs, and I want us all to go play.